Welcome, everybody. Today we have Neil Anderson with us from Code Mill. Neil, welcome.
Hey, Roy, good to see you.
Uh, and Neil, we hear all the time from our customers. They can't find their content. They need to search on it. They need to work collaboratively to produce new content and monetize. Please tell us a little bit about Code Mill and Cantimo.
Sure. CodeMill is a Swedish company. We've been around for about 15 years. We originally came from user experience, research, and design, which means we basically design and develop custom user interfaces in the web browser for media and entertainment companies. So, as a creative agency, we would be very much involved with working with the users over extended periods of time to identify their workflow challenges, how they wanted to solve those, what ideas there were around solving media workflows, and then we would design custom interfaces to help them make their work more efficient. So obviously over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a huge increase in demand for content, high value content, fast turnaround content. The volume of content is increasing all the time, but also the volume of metadata associated with content has grown a lot too. So customers now looking for, being able to identify where there are ad breaks. If you're talking about sports, they want to identify where specific events happen, whether it's goals or substitutions or fouls or whatever it is. So that growth in content, that growth in metadata, especially time-based metadata, means that really the need for efficiency and integrated solutions for media entertainment customers has just grown exponentially in recent years. And we help to solve that, both from a design point of view, but we also have our own products that customers license and use as part of the overall media workflow.
Right. And I get the impression in working with your company that your products evolved by listening to your customers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean the our Accurate Player product and Accurate Video products were originally developed by request from Sony Pictures Television. So they designed and built one of the first media supply chain platforms in the cloud. This is going back at least 8 years ago now. And they needed a sophisticated media player that could handle not only playback of video frame accurately, but to also provide things like different types of playback controls for QC operators to be able to spot check their content, check everything is in sync with their audio, with their subtitles, but also because the Sony project called Media Center was about taking US content and preparing it for EMEA distribution. So it was all about localization. So they were dealing with lots of different audio tracks, different subtitles, different dubbed tracks of audio. And ultimately, they needed to check all of the different versions they were creating for the UK, for France, for Spain, across EMEA, and play that in a media player that would easily let them work with the content. And it needed to work in the browser and it needed to work in the cloud. And of course, 8 years ago, almost nobody was doing media workflows in the cloud at that point. So they came to us and commissioned CodeMill to develop Accurate Player. And that's our kind of best in class professional media player designed for those kinds of use cases. And from that, we then developed our what we call Accurate Video products. So these are actually specific tools around things like QC, around compliance, around identifying ad breaks in content or binge markers, opening and closing credits where you need to skip credits, for example, on VOD platforms, or maybe other kinds of QC fixes where you have black frames or color bars that have appeared in the content that you want to remove. Those quick fixes and those kinds of decisions that can be made in the cloud or at least remotely from any location in a web browser is something that, of course, has been adopted significantly in recent years as customers have been moving from on-prem or they've been wanting to bring together different teams globally into a single system in the cloud. And so these Accurate Player, Accurate Video products really enable that cloud native workflow where teams are distributed globally, where they follow the sun. And since that original project, most of the major Hollywood studios and many of the broadcasters and a lot of the media brands are using Accurate Player and Accurate Video to solve some of those common tasks in the browser. So yes, it has absolutely come from customer feedback all this time. It wasn't like, oh, we came up with a good idea and let's develop it. It was very much like, can you help us with this workflow challenge? And again, I guess that goes back to our pedigree and user experience, which is, solving user problems. Because of course, traditionally in the technology industry, technologists will go, "Oh, I like this product. I'm going to buy it. Hey, you guys, use that product." And then you would just get on and use it, and you'd have to learn it and all its foibles. But if you come from user experience point of view, it's sitting down with the users and saying, what are your challenges, and how can we design software that will work in the way that you want it to work? And that's the user perspective. But of course, as now people are moving to the cloud, or at least hybrid cloud, and consolidating their workflows from all the different teams, that need for that single user experience, that consistency, that's where UX based focus comes into its, really comes really strong. And it's not just about buying products, but also about suiting the user's needs and solving their specific workflows. So that really kind of, in a long answer, gives you some of the history and some of the reasons why we work very much with end users rather than just the technologists.
Yeah.
But of course, they're obviously the key sponsors in a lot of these projects and things like that.
Sure, sure. And you mentioned media companies, you mentioned Sony. Would you agree that in today's world, every company is a media company? They all have
Well,
proliferating content and a need to track it, search it, and
absolutely.
produce. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I mean, I've been in this industry 25 years. When I started out, it was all around desktop video editing, graphics, color grading, shared storage, those classic on-prem post-production workflows. And when the desktop was good enough to do video and audio and graphics, whereas the previous generation, if you go back to the early mid 90s and prior to that, it was all hardware, it was bespoke, very expensive hardware systems. Those were very expensive. It was required a lot of technical effort. But with the desktop, suddenly it was democratizing video. And companies like Apple and Adobe and Avid have helped to democratize the technology so that, as you say, anyone can produce video content. And of course, everybody does want to produce video content. I mean, I've worked with the most unusual companies in the world producing video content, whether it's nuclear power stations, uh, corporate investment banks, um, obviously religious organizations. Everybody wants to produce content for a given audience, whether it's internally corporate or if it's for investigating issues with nuclear power reactors or wind turbines. I mean, of course, studios and Hollywood and broadcasters and big brands want to get their message out to their consumer audience, but equally within all of these other markets, energy, finance, utilities, and all of these other areas, video has just exploded in at least in this century, especially. So everybody wants to produce content, and of course, as consumers, we also now generate our own video content too. So it's been an interesting evolution over the last couple of decades, especially. And I find everyone has the same problems. It's the same workflow challenges. It's just how big is your problem? Whether
Sure.
you're a one guy making YouTube videos or a massive studio producing, hundreds of thousands of hours a year with thousands of users globally distributed, it's just a size problem. Everyone has the same fundamental challenges. So yeah, it's very interesting. I that's why I'm still in this industry. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. And to now ask a bit about specifics, you now have a Cantimo panel inside Premiere Pro, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we Cantimo, which is our MAM solution, has is now we've just released version 6, and it's had Premiere Pro support for a very long time. And the reason is it was one of the first media asset management products that ran natively in the web browser at a time we're talking about best part of 15 years ago now, where most media asset management products required a Windows desktop installer or even a Mac desktop installer, and they only ran on a single physical server like a Windows server or even a Mac server. Whereas with Cantimo, it was actually built on top of Linux and built on REST APIs and built on web browser technology at a point where these things were really relatively new at that point in time. And so we've always had that flexible media asset management solution that could be customized, that could be easily integrated. And Adobe Premiere, at that point was also one of the first NLEs that was really exploding in popularity largely when Apple discontinued Final Cut, the original Final Cut. So Cantamo had that Final Cut integration, and then of course Premiere Pro really started to rise. And of course, we needed to support Premiere Pro as well. So we developed a panel, and since then we've refactored it a number of times. We've made it more sophisticated and more advanced. So yeah, it's a very popular feature of Cantamo nowadays.
Wonderful. And you've already referred to this, but just to confirm and maybe emphasize it, but your solutions absolutely are for both on-prem and cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, Cantamo was historically on-prem 10, 15 years ago, but even as far back as 2016, which I guess we're 8 years ago now, we started to have customers deploying Cantamo in the cloud, so in public cloud, Amazon Web Services principally. We did a project in the UK for ITV called the Phoenix Project, and that was one of the first hybrid cloud solutions where Cantamo was deployed in AWS, but was actually connecting to on-premise storages and workflows. So that was where we started to do hybrid cloud. And of course, nowadays, more and more customers want to run only in the cloud. But we still, of course, support on-prem, and we have many customers on-prem. You can also connect to cloud storages as well. So the concept of a hybrid cloud, it really has a couple of different concepts where you can be on-prem connected to the cloud, or you can be in the cloud connecting to on-prem, as well as having cloud storage. So it's, we talk about hybrid cloud as more hub and spokes, where Cantamo is the hub in the cloud and the spokes are the different storage sites geographically or internationally distributed. But certainly, we still have customers on-prem, especially because, we have certain customers that are on very strong financial regulation or very strong security regulation and other important compliance and regulatory standards that they need to abide by. So we will always continue to support on-prem customers.
Gotcha. Well, Neil, gosh, thank you for joining us today. I want to say our Synesys workflow team enjoys working with you and your entire team on UX, UI designs for customers and help with the creative process. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And,
Good
also,
to speak.
thank you. And also to all those watching, our customers, please contact us, Synesys. We'll work with CodeMill to provide solutions for your workflow. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy.